All right, this is Lesson 9. How is the Philadelphia Convention organized? Lesson purpose. The Constitution of the United States of America was written at a convention held in Philadelphia in 1787. This lesson describes some of the important people who attended and the first steps they took in Philadelphia. The structure and rules they gave to their deliberations played a major role in the outcome by providing a framework for civil discourse, that is, the reasoned discussion of issues. The Virginia Plan, the first blueprint that the delegates considered, created the agenda for the subsequent discussion. Terms to take note of here: civil discourse. That's what we do in class. We attempt to. It's kind of like debate, but it's where you have a discussion where you're not attacking, you're not slinging mud, you're listening to other person's points of view, backing up what you have to say with facts, and considering the other people who bring facts to the table as well. And the idea of civil discourse is to come to an understanding of what is the best course of action for both preserving the rights of the individual as close to that of the state of nature as we can have, and creating the best environment for the common good. Bit different than today's politics, and many of our philosophers that are currently speaking today are calling for a return to civil discourse versus civil argument. Who attended the Philadelphia Convention? 55 delegates attended the meeting that later became known as the Philadelphia Constitutional Convention. This group of men is now often called the framers of the Constitution. You may want to take a moment, look at your study guides, because there are two questions there. Delegates were appointed by their state legislators to appoint their states or represent their states at the convention. States sent as few as 2 delegates, New Hampshire, and as many as 8, Pennsylvania. However, each state only had 1 vote, just as they did in Congress under these Articles of Confederation. The delegates ranged in age from 26 to 81. The average age was 42. About 3/4 of them had served in Congress. Most were prominent in their states, and some had played important roles in the Revolution. Some were wealthy, but most were not. Contemporary observers were impressed by the quality of delegates to the Philadelphia Convention. A French diplomat stationed in America observed that never before, even in Europe, had there been an assembly more respectable for talents, knowledge, disinterestedness, and patriotism. From Paris, Thomas Jefferson wrote to John Adams in London that the convention was an assembly of demigods. You may want to check your study guide. Perhaps the most balanced view of the men at Philadelphia came later. From early 20th century historian Max Farrand, who in 1913 wrote, "In the framing of the Constitution of the United States, great men there were, it is true, but the convention as a whole was composed of men such as would be appointed to a similar gathering at the present time, professional men, businessmen, and gentlemen of leisure, patriotic, statesmen, and clever, scheming politicians, some trained by experience and study for the task before them, and others utterly unfit. It was essentially a representative body. Most of the framers' stories are worth telling in detail. 8 played particularly significant roles. George Washington, 1732 to 1799, was the most respected and honored man in the country during the Revolutionary War. He had left Mount Vernon, his Virginia plantation, to lead the American army to victory over the British. The difficulties that Congress faced in supplying his army, as well as his experience leading an army composed of men from across 13 states, convinced him that the United States needed a strong national government. Washington initially refused the invitation to attend the convention because he wanted to remain in private life. He later agreed to be a delegate from Virginia, fearing that if he did not attend, then people might think he had lost faith in Republican government. Washington was unanimously elected president of the convention. You might want to check your study guides at this point. He did not take an active role in the debates, but his presence and support of the Constitution, together with the widespread assumption that he would be the nation's first president, were essential to the success of the Constitutional Convention and the Constitution's ratification by the states. James Madison probably had the greatest influence on the organization of the national government. Madison was among the youngest of the revolutionary leaders, but by 1787, his talents had long been recognized and admired. In 1776, at the age of 25, he had been elected to the Virginia Convention, where he was named to a committee to frame the state constitution. He first displayed his lifelong commitment to freedom of religion when he persuaded George Mason, author of the Virginia Declaration of Rights, to change the clause that guaranteed toleration of religion to one that secured its free exercise. Madison's influence at the convention was great, in part because he spent the previous winter studying ancient and modern political theory in preparation for the deliberations. Benjamin Franklin of Pennsylvania was 81 years old and in poor health. He was internationally respected, and his presence lent an aura of wisdom to the convention. Alexander Hamilton of New York, who had been Washington's aide during the Revolution, was among the stalwart supporters of a strong national government. He was outvoted within his own state's delegation and departed Philadelphia in frustration before the convention was half over. However, he returned for a few days and signed the completed document in September. James Wilson of Pennsylvania, although not as well known as Madison or Hamilton, was also a major influencer, particularly on how the delegates shaped the office of the president. Governor Morris of Pennsylvania was one of the delegates who spoke most often at the convention. He is credited with taking the principal role in drafting the Constitution. Edmund Randolph, Virginia's governor, officially headed that state's delegation and introduced the Virginia plan to the convention. Randolph refused to sign the final document because he said it departed too much from the Republican propositions of the Virginia plan. However, he ultimately supported ratification. Connecticut's Roger Sherman was instrumental in forging the Connecticut Compromise on representation in Congress, which helped shape American federalism. Why did Thomas Jefferson not attend the Philadelphia Convention? What important founders did not attend the convention? Several important political leaders did not attend the Constitutional Convention. Thomas Jefferson was in Paris as U.S. Minister to France. John Adams, principal architect of the Massachusetts Convention of 1780 and author of the Defense of the Constitutions of Government of the United States of America, was serving as U.S. ambassador to Great Britain. Patrick Henry, the revolutionary leader, refused to attend the convention, supposedly saying, "I smell a rat." He opposed the development of a strong national government and was suspicious of what might happen at the convention. Other leaders who did not attend the Philadelphia Convention included John Hancock, Samuel Adams, and Richard Henry Lee. Besides these prominent individuals, one state refused to send delegates. Rhode Island's legislature did not want a stronger national government. The Articles of Confederation require the approval of all 13 states to make amendments. The convention had been appointed to recommend amendments, not to scrap the Articles in favor of a new national constitution. Rhode Island believed that it could exercise veto power over what was proposed by simply refusing to participate. By withholding their vote, they thought they could bring the whole thing down. What rules did the delegates adopt for the convention? On Friday, May 25th, 1787, 11 days after the convention was scheduled to begin, delegations from a majority of states were present in Philadelphia. After electing George Washington president of the convention, the delegates appointed a committee to draw up the rules for the meeting. The next Monday and Tuesday, the delegates adopted the following key rules to govern their debates. Delegates from at least 7 states had to be present for the convention to do business each day. If a delegate's absence would leave a state without representation, then he had to go get permission to be absent. When rising to speak, a delegate had to address the president while he was speaking. Other members could not pass notes, hold conversations with one another, or read a book, pamphlet, or paper. A member was not allowed to speak more than twice on the same question. He could not speak the second time until every other member had had a first opportunity to speak on the subject. Committees could be appointed as necessary. Any decision made by the convention was subject to reconsideration and change. No decision had to be final until the entire plan was completed. The convention's proceedings were to remain secret. No delegate could disclose the substance of the debates, although they were allowed to take notes. Had it not been for Madison, who attended nearly every session and kept careful notes that would be published after his death, probably little would be known about what happened during the convention. They did this to allow them to be free of influence of the public. The rules establish the basis for civil discourse, a reasoned discussion in which every member has the opportunity to speak on any question, in which no individual's voice can drown out the ideas of others, and in which listening matters as much as speaking. In this discussion, ideas and proposals introduced later had the opportunity to alter decisions already made. This rule was essential because each provision of a constitution is related to many others. Secrecy allowed for the free exchange of ideas. Many delegates feared that if debates were made public, then they would not feel free to express their real opinions or to change their minds in response to good arguments. They also thought the new constitution would have a greater chance of being accepted if people did not know about the arguments. That occurred while it was being debated. Over nearly 4 months, these rules guided the convention's debate. At 4 critical points, delegates appointed committees to suggest solutions to difficult issues. 1, a committee to resolve the problem of representation in Congress, a committee of detail to write a draft constitution including provisions for the executive and judicial branches, a committee on postponed matters to deal with issues such as how to elect the national president, and a committee on style to prepare the final language. What was the Virginia Plan? Many delegates came to Philadelphia convinced that the Articles of Confederation should be scrapped, not amended. One of these was James Madison. Before the convention, he already had drafted a plan for a new national government, which came to be called the Virginia Plan. The Virginia delegates agreed to put Madison's plan forward as a basis for the convention's discussions. Edmund Randolph, Madison's fellow Virginian, who later would become the first U.S. Attorney General, did so on May 29, 1787. The most important thing to know about the Virginia Plan is that it proposed a strong national government. The Articles of Confederation authorized the national government to act only on the states, not on the people directly. Under the Virginia Plan, the national government would have the power to make and enforce the laws and collect taxes, both actions that would directly affect individuals. Each citizen would be governed under the authority of 2 governments, the national government and the state government. Both governments would get their authority from the people. The existence of 2 governments, national and state, each given a certain amount of authority, is known as a federal system. In addition, the Virginia Plan recommended the following. The national government would have 3 branches, legislative, executive, and judicial. The legislative branch would be more powerful than the other branches because, among other things, it would have the power to select people to serve in the executive and judicial branches. The national legislature, Congress, would have 2 houses. The House of Representatives would be elected directly by the people of each state. The House then would elect the Senate from lists of persons nominated by the state legislatures. The number of representatives from each state in both the House and Senate would be based on the size of its population or on the amount of its contribution to the federal treasury. This system of proportional representation meant that states with larger populations would have more representation in legislature than would states with smaller populations. Congress would have power to make all laws that individual states were not able to make, such as laws regulating trade between 2 or more states. Congress would have power to strike down state laws that it considered to be in violation of the national constitution or the national interest. Congress would have the power to call forth the armed forces of the nation against the state if necessary to enforce laws passed by the Congress. So lesson 9 is shorter. It's probably worth going back through and looking at some of the elements of the proposed new Constitution, especially in looking at setting up a class government so that we can deal with some of our issues emanating from Shaw's rebellion. And I will do another one of these next week for lesson 10. And as you go through your study guides, you might want to pause the video and answer questions. This is the online text version, so the study guide will be in order, but it might be easier if you're working on them in class using the text, but you can use either one. I even gave some cues in this video of when those questions might arise.